Hello, Mayudzin. Yes, this is live streaming here. You must be new around here. Good to have you on board. All right, the rest of you, whoever you may be, welcome. Try to get my monitor going. There we go. All right. Hello, my name's Dan. This is Daily Art Adventure number, I have to look, I forgot already, number 730. That means in the last 2 years and 10 months, I've done 730 episodes of Daily Art Adventure. That's what that means. This is nothing but silly shtick. It's just for fun. All right. Thank you for joining me today. And that was a new viewer, Mayo Zin. It is live streaming. Good to have you on board. All right, let me show you what I'm working on here. Let me get my fingers out of the way. There we go. I am working on 3 illustrations for an advertising agency. This is the kind of thing. Hello, Michael. Good to have you on board as well. This is the kind of thing that I used to do a lot of for. I want you to see my face again for just my lovely face. Bruno, good to have you on board, my friend. It's been a while since I've seen your name. Good to have you here. Bruno, I always remember you. You were the one who looked up my friend Neil Watson. Do you remember that? And discovered that he had passed away about 10 years ago now. Anyway, this is the first of the 3 illustrations that I'm doing for this client. So I'll let you see it way up close for a second. Pen and ink crosshatching. Very unusual subject matter. I have no idea what they're going to do with these illustrations. No idea whatsoever. So that's always interesting. I do know that when they publish this, they're going to fill in the gaps between the logs, either with black or some other color. So they wanted me to leave that blank so they could fill it in. But the illustration actually looks much better when, as you see on Instagram, I published there with black in background. Anyway, that's illustration number 1. And now I am working, as you saw a moment ago, on illustration number 2, which is a treescape with water in the foreground, some reflection, and a sky in the background. Uh-oh. Somebody's device quit working. All right, I'll tell you a little bit about what it's like to be an illustrator here in a minute. It's quite different from being a quote-unquote a fine artist. Now, it's like doing commissions for people. When you're an illustrator, you're always engaged in the business of trying to read other people's minds, because your job as an illustrator is, of course, to do what your client is asking you to do. I'm assuming you realize that that's pretty simple. You're being paid to draw pictures for somebody else, right? Which entails a great deal of mind reading, or at least attempts at mind reading. Bruno, you do remember that. I appreciate that. I still make reference periodically to a man who I don't think he knew this. I don't know if he knew, actually, and I would have liked to have told him. I don't know that he realized that I consider him a mentor. We never got together one-on-one, ever. By the way, those of you who just joined me, I'm talking about a good old friend of mine named Neil Watson. We belong to an organization called the North Carolina Association of Designers and Illustrators. And frankly, Neil was stretching his own. He wasn't exactly an illustrator. He was a fine artist who worked in pen and ink and watercolor. Again, tragically, you can't find out a lot about him online because he really passed away before the internet became a huge thing. So, but he is a man worth remembering, Neil Watson, and he was actually a leading hand surgeon in England before he moved to the United States. You can Google him. You can find, if you look hard enough, you can find things about him. And he did not renew his medical license in America. Instead, he became a full-time artist. So how's that for a Renaissance man? Anyway, those of you who joined me didn't come to hear me talk about my old friend Neil Watson, but Bruno's presence brought that all to mind. So I started telling you a while ago about when you're an illustrator, you're engaged in the process of trying to read other people's minds. That's just part of the business, because and in the course of doing that, we realize how difficult reading other people's minds really is. So there's a lesson somewhere in there for all of us. When you think you understand what other people are thinking, now let me say, anybody who's happily married, has long since given up trying to read other people's minds. We're just really bad at it. So let me interrupt my drawing here to show you. For instance, let me show you the third of the three illustrations. Right, just by way of, okay. So they said, we want a townscape, a row of buildings. So the first thing I sent to them, I'll zoom in here a little bit. The first thing I sent to them was this page. I emailed it to them, of course, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 images. And I said, okay, is any of these close? This was 2 or 3 weeks ago now. I can't remember what they said. But whatever they said, it made me come back and do 8 more. So now we're up to 16. I call these thumbnails. Okay? And here's another. Now we're getting into what I call sketches. So we've graduated from thumbnails to sketches. And believe it or not, there's one missing in between here. And then I started doing some pen and ink. And I got this far, sent them this, and they said, no, 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 no. What happened, by the way, is somebody else at the ad agency I'm working for, somebody else on their team got involved at this point. And I don't even remember why I did this one. But there you go. All right, so then they said, no, 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 we want tall buildings. So I took one of the sketches, and I scribbled in a bunch of tall buildings. And I said, like this. And then they sent me another photograph and said, no. So this is the last sketch that I did for them. And hooray, they like this one. In fact, now here's the funny. Bad audio. Are we doing okay audio-wise? Mayo Zin in Korea. Yeah, very hard to live by as an illustrator anywhere. All right, so they liked this. In fact, they liked this so much that then they went back to this one and said, well, you know what? This is so neat. We kind of like the messiness of that. So now after approving this, sort of, they're going back and say, well, okay, if you can make the sky and the water looser, maybe we can go with this illustration. But we really like this one. So So I don't know how many, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I think we're at 22 sketches. Good, thanks Bruno, no audio problems, glad to hear. So I think I did 22 sketches for that job. So any of you who are thinking of entering a career in illustration, run for your lives. Don't do it. Okay, I jest, of course, but as you can hear, there's a degree of a degree of truth in that statement. This business of reading other people's minds is quite the challenge. Now, all of this actually becomes quite distressing if you don't feel like you're being paid fairly for your work. All right, so I'm just being really honest here. And being really honest, I will tell you that I think I am, yes, being paid fairly for this job. So that helps take the sting out of everything. Does that make sense? So there you go. Just, again, any of you who are thinking of becoming illustrators, what's the difference between an illustrator and a fine artist? There's much conversation, discussion, and argument has taken place about that over the decades. Here's one definition of the difference between fine art and illustration. Let me try to get some of this reflection away from you guys. An illustrator is paid for his or her work, and a fine artist is not. Until it sells. All right, let's just talk about pen and ink here. So even though this is not a scratchboard job per se, I'm using a little bit of scratchboard technique. I don't know if this knife is not very sharp. Hang on. Okay, let's get rid of that one. I'm drawing, as I said yesterday, I'm drawing on shiny paper, like a magazine paper. Maybe many of you would be familiar with brochure paper. So it's called, uh-oh, my wife is calling me. Hang on. All right, gang, I am so sorry to do this, but when my wife calls, I have to answer. This is the only interruption that I'll stop for. I'll be back in 40 seconds, okay? Hang on. Don't go away. I'll be back in 40 seconds. Sorry about that, gang. Yeah, that was pretty urgent. So, okay, I was saying, even though this is not a scratchboard illustration per se, I am using some scratchboard technique. And the reason this is working is because I'm drawing on shiny paper, also called clay-coated paper, also called enamel paper. Same exact thing, just different descriptions for the same kind of paper. Enamel paper, clay coat paper, shiny paper. Okay, so what I'm doing right now with this etching tool is scratching off the enamel coating. If I were to be doing a lot of this scratching, I would have done this job on a piece of clay board. I walked into an art supply store last week, by the way, when I was out of town, so I didn't have my normal. And I asked actually the manager of the store if they carried clay board. And evidently, I mean, I am so accustomed to operating in the world of art. Evidently, clayboard is such an esoteric term that the manager of an art and craft store did not know what it was. He took me back to the clay section of his store. I didn't laugh at him, I promise. I'm laughing at him now. Anyway, if you don't know what clayboard is, evidently you're in good company. Because even some people who operate an art supply store don't know what clayboard is. Woo! All right. But this is This is clay coated paper, so it's just sort of like what I call sometimes a poor man's clayboard, cheap clayboard. And of course, I could have accomplished the same thing by picking up my pen and drawing a dotted line. But I feel like this method gives me just a little bit more interesting look. I might be wrong about that, but that's the way I feel. While I'm at it, I'll show you another technique that I'm using. Again, this is supposed to be just a straight up pen and ink cross-hatching illustration, okay? But I have here at my disposal a tube of white gouache, and I've just put out some gouaches. Again, just real quick operation, not getting fancy. I just put it out on a piece of Post-it note, and I'm doing essentially the same thing now, but instead of scratching, I'm painting. So again, get a slightly different feel. When I send this finished illustration to my client, of course, I don't send them this. Back in the olden days, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when I was a full-time illustrator, of course, we would all the time send the final artwork. It's hard to believe now, really, honestly. We would send the final artwork, the physical artwork, like through the mail or deliver it in person or send a courier. We would send real artwork. And like I said, I can't believe that now. It's like, wow. Nowadays, I think a client would be shocked. they would be dumbfounded if they received a piece of physical art in the mail at their front door. I think they say, "What? What are we supposed to do with this?" I think it's pretty standard now in the world of illustration that it's my job to scan this image into my computer. So to be an illustrator, of course, you have to own a computer and you have to own a scanner. Check. To be a printer, you have to own a computer and a scanner and a printer. All three of those. So sorry if I'm bursting your bubble. Back in the days when I got started, we were still banging rocks together to make charcoal powder. That's a slight exaggeration there, gang. Rock music was when we banged rocks together. Okay, you know that old joke. Anyway, so what my client will receive from me will be an email with typically a JPEG attached. And I also, by the way, I should say, if you want to be an illustrator, you have to have a Macintosh computer, not a PC. If you want to enter the world of art, I know I'm driving. Uh-oh, is that my wife again? Oh, man. Oh, you guys, I'm sorry. I have to... All right. Hello, gang. I am so sorry. My wife, my dear, dear, dear wife, is out running errands for me, picking up stuff for me. And of course, then she runs into unforeseen problems. So I'm so sorry about that. Every time that happens, my viewership goes from 20 back down to 5. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. So I'm going to stop and finish there with this guy. So I've showed you two tricks. One is an etching tool, scratchboard tool, and the other is opaque gouache. And part of the reason I was telling you about that I'm going to send my client a JPEG, of course, is they will probably never see unless they purchase the original artwork outright, which is an additional cost. They'll never see this, so they won't be able to see like you can right now. You can see paint, so to speak, sitting on top of the paper, right? But when I scan the artwork, that will be invisible. All right, let's turn the light table back on, turn off some of these lights. Let's go back to pen and ink work down here at the bottom. And again, part of my assignment here at the moment is to make this part of the illustration looser than the trees in the middle. That's just after my client saw my next rough sketch, they all said, "Ooh, more like that." Does that make sense? By the way, a few minutes ago I was talking about, as an illustrator, your job is to read people's minds, which turns out is a lot harder than it sounds. But my client, they're engaged in the same process. They're trying to read my mind. Okay, so it's, in this case, we have one person in Raleigh, North Carolina, trying to read the minds of a group of people in Brooklyn, New York. And a group of people in Brooklyn, New York, trying to read the mind of one illustrator in North Carolina. By the way, I enjoyed all your chats very much. Yeah, I get in trouble if I don't answer my wife, yeah. And hello, Barbara from Michigan. Good to hear from you again. I think some of you remember I grew up in the lovely state of Michigan. Have very good, happy memories of life in Michigan. I left the North when I was 23 years old, but then moved back when I was 28, stayed for about 4 more years, and then moved back to the South again. So you Americans at least know of what I speak. So I've been a Yankee mostly in the early part of my life, and a Southerner in most of the later part of my life. And I still miss the snow. Hello, Valerie. Good to have you on board. Thanks for joining us for the first time. All right, so my client asked for looser tree. They thought this was tight, and again, I settled. Trying to read their minds. I thought this is what they wanted, partly because this is a page from this is an illustration from my website. Okay, dannelsonart.com. Click on illustrations. Click on pen and ink illustrations. And this is one of the drawings here, and they said we like that. So I felt like this corresponded to that quite well. But then after they saw a later sketch, where is it? I had it here a minute ago. After they saw this rough sketch, they changed their minds a little bit and said, "Ooh, no, more like that." So does that make sense? And that's just, again, that's the way it goes. Some of you here, you're getting, whether you want it or not, you're getting a bit of an education about what it's like to be a freelance illustrator. Not for the faint of heart. You can't wear your emotions on your sleeve. You have to have some mental toughness, because people are going to jerk you around. That's just the way it is, and you just have to get used to it. Now, it helps a lot, as I said earlier, helps a lot if you feel like you're being paid fairly. Where it really starts to hurt is when your client has, bargained you down, so to speak, and asked you to work for less than you want to. Then this kind of thing really hurts. I'm happy to report that is not the case with this particular job. I'm being paid very fairly, so it goes a long way to taking the sting out of such vicissitudes. Bless your hearts, all you people who are not English speakers. Native is not your native tongue. I'm jerking you around quite a bit. Well, forget that. Those of you who do speak English, I'm jerking you around too. I'm trying to get you to learn words. I'm a lover of words. Some of us are, and some of us are not. And I'm just one of those who is. So my vocabulary doesn't mean I'm smarter than anybody else. It just means I use a higher percentage of my intellect to retain the meaning of words. How about that? Was that gentle enough? You know, we're all different. I can read people whose vocabulary is much larger than mine. Oh, and there are plenty of them out there, believe me. And I feel like a half-wit. But I do happen to know that my vocabulary is, what shall we say, on the uphill side of the average American. I'm trying to say this without being, what's the word, snobby or offensive. I know my vocabulary is larger than average because my electronic devices often do not recognize the words that I'm using. All right, let's just leave that subject before I offend anybody any worse than I already have. Anyway. The vicissitudes of life. That is a word that everybody should know. It's a very helpful term. I mentioned the other day when I was doing the first Pen and Ink broadcast that in order to do crosshatching well, in order to do it well, you need to be relaxed. You can't have tension in your body or your arm or your hand, or it will show up in your crosshatching. So in a way, a good long day of crosshatching gets a little tedious for sure, but it's also very relaxing. Much like doing calligraphy, you have to be relaxed to do calligraphy, or you will not be doing good calligraphy. Similar with crosshatching, you have to be relaxed. The sound of relaxation. Hello, Mark Toomey. Good to have you. And good to have Mike B. Art. Is that Mike Bart or Mike B. Art 70? Good to have you as well. And Monique from the Netherlands. Good to have you always with us. Fall weather has finally arrived in central North Carolina. Oh, you Michigan friends, you're saying what? Barbara, by the way, I don't remember where you're from in Michigan. I grew up mostly along the west coast, the pretty part of Michigan, I say, not the Detroit side. And of all the places we lived, my favorite was Petoskey. So certainly, Barbara, you know where Petoskey is. I'll never forget, though, as a young man, I was helping coach the high school cross-country team in 1976. And our first cross-country meet was September 15th, and it snowed. I mentioned a while ago that I still miss the snow. Oh, let me clarify that. I do not miss snow in September or March, April, and May. I don't miss that snow. I just miss the nice, Christmassy snow in December and, okay, January and February. I do not miss snow that came the same time that you're finishing your income tax in mid-April and you get 2 feet of snow. That I don't miss that. I just miss the nice snow that we would get, maybe Thanksgiving. I can handle snow at Thanksgiving. Not so much, When I was a kid, I remember most of the time, and this was in Grand Rapids, and of course this is before our climate changed. There's no, in my opinion, not much doubt the climate has changed a little bit. Never mind, I'm not going to get on this subject. I will just tell you I am a student of history, philosophy, and human nature, so I do not I do not believe much of what we read in the contemporary news cycle. I'll just put it that way. Yes, I do feel like I'm too smart to follow what the media tells me. Anyway, I didn't mean to trigger anybody there. Anyway, when I was a kid, we would go trick-or-treating on Halloween, and it seems like to me about half the time at Halloween we were trick-or-treating in the snow. My guess is my memory's not quite correct. It was less than half the time, but it seemed to me it was at least half the time as a kid that by Halloween we had snow. Certainly by Thanksgiving, and I'm for you Northerners, you're all nodding and saying, "Yep, yep, yep." You Southerners, you're saying, "What? What?" The first time I moved to the South I was 23 years old, and I moved from Michigan to Texas. And I moved there in the fall. So it was late August, early September. And, leaves were already turning in Michigan. And I moved to Texas, Fort Worth, Texas. And during the daytime, it was over 100 degrees. But that's not what freaked me out as a Yankee born and bred, actually Canadian born and Yankee bred, born in Canada, grew up mostly in Michigan. What really freaked me out was that after the sun went down, see, up north, when the sun goes down, the temperature goes down. You Southerners are saying, well, it does that down here too. And I'm going, no. You do not understand. Okay, in Atlanta, for instance, Georgia, I've never lived there, but, if it's 100 degrees in the daytime, oh, sure, it cools down to 92 at night. In Michigan, if it's 95 during the daytime, it cools down to 67 at night. I might be exaggerating slightly, but you get the idea. Up north, it cools down a lot after the sun goes down. So when I moved south, at the time, I was a very serious distance runner. I ran competitively in college, the mile and the 3 mile. I ran a 4:21 mile in college, and I bettered my own time years later when I was coaching in Texas. But anyway, I moved south, and of course it was 100 degrees in the day, so I'm not about to go out and run 10 miles in the daytime. So I waited till it cooled down. So that was my first shock. I went out after dark to run, 5, 10, 15 miles, who knows. But it was still 96 degrees. Now, all you Texans are nodding. All you Southerners are going, yep, yep, yep. And the Northerners are going, what? Anyway, I have very much enjoyed my, living in different parts of the country. Haven't really lived in different parts of the world. Although I tried very hard, I'm not kidding, I tried very hard to live, several times, to live in Europe. And you Europeans, who are you? Well, Mark, you're almost a European. I'm kidding. I know, I'm kidding. Mark, if I remember right, you're a Kiwi. You're from New Zealand, living in Australia. Have I got the right mark? I believe I do. Forgive me. But Monique from the Netherlands. Yeah, I tried very hard to live in Europe several times, and my wife would not have it. So we didn't. I honestly, I feel like I am a European who accidentally got born in America. So I feel like I fit. I'm very comfortable in Northern Europe. Been to Denmark, Sweden briefly, Denmark, Amsterdam 3 times, I believe. The edge of Germany. Haven't really been to Germany. Been to France 4 times, I think, and England a few times. 3, maybe, I can't remember. Our next vacation, we'll hope to go to Ireland and Scotland, which I know to you Europeans, that does not count as Europe. Especially if they succeed in breaking from the EU. There's a reason, isn't it, that they're breaking from the EU. See, even though I don't speak the languages very well, and I have I think, a European sensibility about me. Oh. All right, so it's not my wife calling me this time, but it is my daughter who lives with us. And she knows not to call me unless it's an emergency. So forgive me, folks. I have to take another quick break. Forgive me. I'll be back within 60 seconds. Try to hang in there with me if you can. I'll be right back. Bye-bye. All right, I'm back. Sorry again for the interruptions today. That was my daughter. And generally speaking, they know not to interrupt me when I'm broadcasting, so it wasn't quite an emergency, but it was urgent. Not an emergency like car accident or anything like that. So, I enjoyed Barbara. Yes, up north, so from northern Michigan. You mean like the UP, northern Michigan? Oh, you're back on night shift, Mark. Oh my goodness. Oh, Mike Bart. Thank you. It's not Mike B. Art. Thank you. Thank you for that correction. You know, on my channel, we get a lot of artists watching, and a lot of artists incorporate the word art. Are you an artist by any chance? So you could call yourself Bart Art, or Art by Bart? I'm sorry, I'm taking your name in vain. I know, but it just seems kind of cute. If you're an artist, you should be able to do something with that. Maybe you already have. So once again, I am using my native approach. My most typical approach to cross hatching is Michael, that was a interesting comment. Oh, you guys are talking to each other. My technique is, generally speaking, my cross hatching is very regular, as you can see. Not always. I did a big illustration job just a year and a half ago or so. I illustrated a book, did 50 illustrations, where the cross hatching was messier than this, more organic. I've had a number of people, complain, so to speak, about my technique on my one viral video. I've had people compare me to other artists who do a much more organic or fluid, where the lines, the cross hatching actually follows the form of whatever it is you're illustrating. And I admire that technique very much and do it sometimes, but not usually. This is my native style. As I was saying the other day, for some reason my brain, my mind, my eye, I enjoy, let me zoom in real close just for a minute. I enjoy the fact that my cross hatching is so regular, and yet creates the illusion of an organic shape. So that's evidently that's just what I enjoy. So it is indeed a more abstract approach to cross hatching. So there you go. To each his or her own. And yeah, Mark, it does harken back to pointillism. I think pointillism is the only technique that's more monotonous than cross hatching, is pointillism. I really enjoy etching, or it's actually fake etching, faux etching with clayboard. If you go to my website, dannelsonart.com, click on illustrations at the top of the page, and then there's several albums come up, and one of them is called Pen and Ink. And on that page you can see a couple examples of my etching work, and etching is even more, what's the word, fussy than cross hatching, even more exacting. That's the word I'm looking for. Mark, you mentioned I think an Australian artist that I'll look up. What was his name? Somebody uses. I'm not seeing it right now. I'll find it later. I'll look them up. I always enjoy, of course, finding new artists. I've stumbled upon several new artists because of you guys mentioning them either in the chat or the comment. Hey, big thanks to Uncle 60 again for another contribution toward my Mevo camera fund. I appreciate that very much. I don't think Uncle's on right now, but maybe he'll catch this later. Well, hello, Carolyn. I do remember your name. You're from Raleigh. How about that? Welcome. A local person watching my video. That's very unusual. Glad to answer your question. And Barbara asks, I'm sorry, was it Barbara? Asks, how do you pronounce your last name? Is the Z silent or is the B silent? Zivitel. Forgive me, I'll get it here in a minute. Carolyn. Sorry, Mark, not Barbara. Carolyn. Hi, Carolyn. I will tell you what pens I use. I did buy these at Jerry's. I've done quite a bit of experimentation. I haven't bought any $100 fountain pens. Zbavitel. Carolyn, thank you so much. That's no doubt where memories from meeting you downtown. It's called a very creative name. It's called Pen and Ink Sketch. Not a very creative name. Pen and Ink Sketch. I was saying I have purchased pens in the $60, $70, $80 range a couple of times. I'm most happy with this, actually. Along with the pen, I bought their ink, and I'm actually probably the ink is more responsible for my pleasure, for my satisfaction than the pen. It's, again, Pen and Ink Sketch, fountain pen ink, and non-shellac India ink. That's it's the shellac in most inks that are responsible for the pens getting gummed up. So the fact that it's non-shellac is a selling point, a definite advantage there. Carol, next time you see me on the street, be sure to yell and say, "Hey, I'm that lady that was talking to you on your channel." If I I need to connect with people in more than one venue, I get confused. Now, where did we talk? Good to have you on board, Carolyn. Appreciate it. And the one nice thing about these pens is they're quite inexpensive. I mean, I can't remember if it was $19.95 or $29.95. I don't know, but either of those prices quite inexpensive for a fountain pen, and I've been quite happy. Let me show you the inside of it since I've gone this far. Here's the plunger. In fact, here, let me do this in front of you since I bring up the subject. So there's the jar. And the reason I tipped it over is because this is many ink jars do this. There's a jar inside the jar. There's a reservoir near the top of this, so that when I push this down, it doesn't need to go all the way to the bottom of the jar. All right. So I've just, here, I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm not at the right angle, sorry. Oh, hey, hang on. I've got an idea. Bear with me just a minute. I've never done this exact trick before, but I think it'll probably work. Bear with me. There. How about that? There's a new, oh, there we go. All right, so this is the plunger, the reservoir. Let me come up just a little bit. All right. So ink out, stick it down in the jar and twist it clockwise. I don't know if you can see that. You're not seeing it very well, sorry. So now this is full of ink. It's also covered with ink. I should have grabbed a paper towel before I engaged in this operation, because you have to, at least for me, you have to wipe off the outside. Okay, see what I'm doing? I'm wiping off the outside of that. And then you put it back, push it down, and then turn which direction? Yeah, counterclockwise. Did you see that? I don't know if you could see that drip. I'll do another one. There, you saw that one, right? All right, so now the nib is full of ink. Bear with me just a minute. Let's put the lid back on this jar. Toss this over there. Put you guys back up where you belong. Clean off my drawing table. All right, I'm back to my drawing now. For what it's worth, real careful warning. I would certainly not start drawing with this pen the way it is right now, because it's very likely the nib is too filled with ink. So I have this Post-it note here just to make sure that my nib is behaving. That's right, Carolyn, you've got the exact correct caution. So that's what the Post-it note is for, is to make sure that the pen is not going to drop a big glob of black paint on my drawing, which of course happens not terribly infrequently. That means it happens occasionally. And then you have to fix it either with scratching or with white gouache painting over it. All right, how are things looking here? Okay, we're getting there. Again, part of the assignment from my client was to make, part of the feedback that I got back from my client was make the water and the sky looser than the trees. They liked the trees, but they were a little surprised, I could tell by their tone of voice. They were a little surprised at how tight. They were expecting something slightly looser. And I said, well, do you want me to do it again? I'm certainly glad to do it again. I want you to be happy. And they said, no. They liked it, but they were just, as I said, I think the best way to describe it is they liked the look of this, but they were expecting slightly looser. So the art director said, well, how about try this? When you do the water and the sky, make that looser, and let's see if we like it then. So it's possible. I would say there's about a 30% chance at the moment. It's a feeling I have. I would say there's about a 30% chance that I will have to do this entire illustration all over again. And if I do, by the way, I will probably increase the cost of the job. Generally speaking, you know, people changing their mind, changes of direction are assumed in the world of illustration. But as I showed you a while ago, the changes on two of these illustrations have been rather excessive, right? So we're right bumping up against the point where I would be justified in raising my cost. And they have invited me to do that several times, by the way. So that's, but at this point I'm going, nah, no, you're okay. But if I do this illustration all over again, I think that in fact they would be surprised if I didn't raise my price. So anyway, there's just a little bit of insight, what it's like, again, what it's like to be an illustrator, the world of illustration. A certain amount of changes of direction are to be expected. And where that crosses over into excessive, okay, by the way, so I showed you a while ago, the changes that they did on this are definitely excessive. 22 different sketches before I got to this one. And some of those they changed their mind. So it wasn't like just refining the process. It was like, no, let's undo that. We changed our mind about that. Let's go back in the other direction, that kind of thing. So I probably will charge them a little bit for some of that. As you can imagine, I'd much rather have them be very happy, not only with my artwork, but with my attitude, my professionalism, my keeping my cool when I could have gotten irritated. Forgive me, I laugh at how many people in the world who think they're in business for them, especially for themselves, who go for short-term gain and thereby cut off any likelihood of long-term. I would rather have this ad agency, whoever they are, up in Brooklyn, New York, say, man, remember we worked with that one guy down in Raleigh? Yeah, let's call him again, right? And they're not going to feel that way if I, number one, jacked up my prices for every time they twitched, and if I'm pleasant on the phone, etc., etc. That is what I like about the free enterprise system and capitalism. Capitalism, the worst form of what's the word? Finance. Well, that's not the word I want, but in the world, except for all the others. Democracy, worst form of government on the planet. Oh, except for all the others. Right, you've heard that joke. So anyway, it's again, I am surprised often. Usually, when you deal with somebody who is unreasonable, they are not the owner of the business. Usually, they are an underling. I think in particular, one time several years ago now, I went to a shop that sells, believe it or not, they sell used tuxedos. Now, they also rent tuxedos, but I found a place about 40 miles from me here that sell used tuxedos. And if any of you have watched me paint any weddings, you know that I almost always wear a tuxedo and paint in it. So I've calculated that I can get roughly 5 weddings out of one tux. I have a number of tricks up my sleeve for, covering up the paint that I get every time I paint in a tux. I get paint on it every single time. And every single time I paint in a tux, one of the most common comments I get is like, oh my goodness, how do you do that without getting paint on it? Well, I'm telling you the secret now. Oh, I do get paint on it. What do you think? Little bits, little usually. Anyway, I can get about 5 weddings out of one tux, generally speaking, even with my tricks. And so I went into this shop and I said, no, I'm going to be buying a lot of tuxedos. And I've probably bought 15 tuxedos from this place. And I asked them, I said, would you consider, a discount for somebody who's going to buy more tuxes from you than anybody else in your business? And the person said, no. And I said, either that person is not a business person, or that's not the owner. Anyway, just for what it's worth. I mean, folks, that's stupid. If you get a client come through the door and they say, I have the potential of being your most regular client above everybody else, will you give me a discount? Hint, hint. The answer is yes. Are you an idiot? So I have bought several tuxes from them, but I'm looking for an alternate. I'm going to start buying online, and I will stop buying from them. And I've bought an average of 5 tuxes a year for the last 3 years. Now, that's not a huge, but that's significant. Plus, they have one customer, me, who's mildly irritated by their lack of professionalism. And so much so that I'm telling you about it. Isn't that funny? I'm just talking about good business here. So I want my clients up in Brooklyn to say, yeah, remember that Dan Olson guy? Oh, he was so easy to live with, and he was very reasonable in his pricing, blah, 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 blah. That's what good business people do. By the way, and I'll try not to get too much into a rant here, but I actually am these days. For the last 6 months, my friends tease me. For the last 6 months, I've been reading Karl Marx, Das Kapital, because I said I want to go straight to the source. I'm going to go straight to the horse's mouth, so to speak, so that if the subject of Marx and Marxism comes up, first of all, I'm enough of a smartass that I am likely, and I do not approve of this attitude. I'm going to tell you about it anyway, but I'm enough of a smartass to say, okay, wait, stop. Have you read Karl Marx? And of course, the person, my interlocutor, will 99.999% of the time say no. And I say, well, I have. Go read it and then come back. Let's talk. Okay, that's the sign of a real smartass, just in case you wonder. At least I'm honest enough to admit when I'm being one, okay? So I want some credit. I do not approve of being a smartass, but if you're going to be one, at least have the decency to admit. Anyway, so I am reading Karl Marx. I'll give you, for what it's worth, I'll give you my assessment of Karl Marx. First of all, I don't know if English was his first, it wasn't his first language, but and forgive me, I should know if he wrote Das Kapital in English or in German. He lived in London while he wrote it, you know, sat at a booth at the British Library or British Museum, one or the other, and wrote the whole dang thing. By the way, while Engels was paying his bills, paying his rent, buying his food, and paying for his toilet paper, the business entrepreneur Engels was supporting Karl Marx, who could not be bothered by supporting himself. So if I were an English teacher, let's say in a private English school in 1947, and little Carly was in my class and he wrote his dissertation, I would give him a C+ for his quality of writing, maybe even a C-. Repetitious, 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 overly pedantic. All right, but if he were, I'm being really ruthless here and I'm ranting and reading, but okay, just because most of you haven't read Karl Marx. Did I say repetitious yet? Oh my goodness. Lucy Van Peltism. He commits Van Peltism left, right, and center. I've described I won't repeat it here what Van Peltism is, but stay tuned. You'll hear me define it again. If I were a college professor teaching philosophy 101, and little Karl Marx was in my class and wrote a paper with the thesis of Das Kapital in it, likewise, I would give him a C- or a D+. I would say, dear Karl, you have committed one of the unpardonable sins in the world of philosophy. You have taken your little isolated situation, Sitzenleben, that's German. You've taken your Sitzenleben and they've extrapolated it out onto the rest of humanity and throughout history. In other words, what you're experiencing right now in late Industrial Revolution, London, England, is going to be and is the universal state of humanity in capitalism for the next, for the future. He was completely wrong about that, and I was giving him a very bad grade. That was Karl Marx's #1 mistake. Let me put that in normal English, sort of. Karl Marx lived in Charles Dickens' London. Think about it. Charles Dickens, Great Expectations, Oliver Twist. Okay, he lived in that world, and he assumed that basically human history had come to a stop at that point, and it would always be that way. All right, that's just so. Karl Marx is thinly veiled compassion for the poor, thinly veiled envy and hatred for the rich. That's what Karl Marx is: hatred for the rich, masquerading as sympathy for the poor. And if I'm triggering somebody, go read Karl Marx, then come back, let's talk. Don't listen to CNN, because I won't believe you. Don't listen to Fox either. That's beneath me. Woo! I just lost 7 viewers. 7 people just unsubscribed because I had the audacity to question the prevailing. Whew! All right, that's all right. I'm gonna stop ranting right now. It's safe to come back. You're saying, no, it's not. You might launch into another rant any minute. Okay, I guess you're right. At least I have the decency to admit when I'm ranting. I wish all the other ranters would do the same. All right. I'm looking. I'm sitting back and looking. Get rid of this Post-it note. Am I done? Not quite. I'm going to try something else. All the reflection lines here in the water at the moment, they are all outlined, as you can see. But what would happen if I were to do some reflection lines that are just white streaks without the outlining? Let's see. See if I like the look of that. Yeah. That's right. Enough to do another one or two. I want it to look like water. I don't want it to look like a over belabored. I'm not getting a good line there, so let me switch to my little pile of gouache down here. Literally a pile of gouache on a Post-it note here. Tiny bit more water. Now, you know, of course, that I'm going to scan this illustration on my scanner. Open it up, of course, in Photoshop. And clean up anything I need to clean up in Photoshop. I can blow it up to, 1,000 times bigger than this if I want to. So anything that bleeds through, so to speak, anything that I want to erase or white out, of course I can do that. But I don't, this is not a, a digital illustration. So I want to keep the photoshopping to a minimum because I want it to feel like a real organic illustration, which is, of course, what it is. All right, I'm going to stop there. I'll look at that later. I will probably do a quick scan of it and send that to my client for his input. Let's just keep right on going here. There are a few of you watching. There you go. Thank you for answering questions, Susan and Barbara. Yeah. All right, so this is the other illustration, the one that I have done, I think, a total of 22 sketches for. And they really like this last sketch. Jet Li, yes, you are exactly correct. Woodcut is in fact, not so much with this paper. Okay, hang on just a minute. Since we've gotten this far, sure, hang on. Let me show you a trick. This is the same kind of paper that I've been using. Let me demonstrate this something for you really quick. So I just pulled up this ink and got a brush. By the way, if that ink beads up, if it doesn't, it's shiny paper. If it beads up, then I usually have a little bit of soap, a little jar of liquid soap. Okay, bear with me just 1 minute. Let's put this lid back on. I'm going to hit that with a hairdryer really quickly. Forgive me, sorry for the noise. Hang on just a second. All right, good enough. This is a trick worth noting. This is not exactly the same kind of paper. What I mean is, it's the same kind of paper. This is the shiny side, but I have coated this paper. Obviously, I'm thinking now it's a leftover. I've sprayed it with workable fixative. Spray out in the garage or outside, so that I can scrape off. Now it's going to not work well, so I can scrape. Oh, because it's still wet. Sorry. Forgive me, that's not working very well. The idea is you can scrape it off much better because it's got a workable fixative on it. I'm not going to wait for that to get dry. But having gone that far, I will show you. Here's another trick. Speaking of woodcut, this is not an art tool. This is an office supply tool. But you can do this on any kind of paper, of course. But since I've got the black blob here, you can do stuff like that. I've done a lot of illustrations that are, in fact, fake woodcut illustrations using this technique. And of course, you could do the same thing if you want to be more precise, if you want to be a little bit more accurate, of course. You can do gouache. So it's white gouache, the brush. So I'm just showing you several different ways to accomplish fake woodcut or fake etching, if you will, without investing in, say, a clay board. Everything I did at the last there can be done without spraying it with. There we go. Now it's working. It's dry now, so I'm scratching through the workable fixative. And of course, you can do very fine lines if you want. So there you go, just a little trick for what it's worth. Detour now, back to exactly office white outline. Let's go back to the illustration at hand now. And remembering that something about workable fixative. Oh, yes, you can ink over workable fixative. By the way, just a quick tip here. If you're starting an illustration, don't start over here and work this way, because as over the hours, like if this illustration is going to take me 3 or 4 hours, during the course of that 3 or 4 hours, my technique will, my hand, my line, the character of my line will shift ever so slightly. Now, I'm not worried about it. Of course, I've done it for years, so it's really going to shift minimally. But I don't want to start over here and shift this way. Do you understand? So typically as a habit then, I'll start somewhere in the middle of the illustration, let's say here with this building, so that people can't see, oh, you know, his style over here is slightly different. His line has a different, slightly different, like over here my line might be looser or tighter or straighter or closer together, further apart. You don't want it to migrate as you go across the illustration. So start in the middle somewhere. And once again, my client seemed particularly drawn to the looseness of this sketch. So I'm trying to do an illustration that is looser than this one. Get it? So that's what you're seeing here, is a scribbly, a little bit more scribbly lines, more expressive lines, which I actually kind of prefer myself as well. A little bit more, I don't know, is the word expressive, artistic, artsy, more artsy-fotsy. By the way, let me give you another tip. See, you can see all these vertical buildings, right? Where's my other sketch? Here it is. You can see it better. All right, when I did this sketch last week, before I started scribbling, I literally took a ruler. Why would I say literally? I figuratively took a ruler. Okay, sorry. Fun with game. No, I literally took a ruler and made pencil lines. Vertical, 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 vertical. About every half inch, about every 3/4 of an inch. I made a bunch of light pencil lines. I have since erased them, so you can't see them anymore. But they created guidelines for me. All of this was done freehand, but I had light pencil lines that were perfectly vertical that helped me keep all these buildings vertical. Does that make sense? I have a tendency to slant everything to the left, the opposite of an italic. So just a tip for what it's worth. Since you can still see them faintly here, but I've erased the line. So that helped me a great deal, I think, keep all of my tall buildings not looking like they were falling over. Most people are noticeably averse to skyscrapers falling over. I'm going to go ahead actually and do a little bit of shading already on this building. By the way, I mentioned a while ago, I have several different approaches to cross-hatching. Let me show, well, I don't have a fine point pen here, but some of my cross-hatching, let me get it real close here. Some of my cross-hatching looks more like this. Are we going to get in focus there? Not sure that we are. Hang on. Okay, some of my native style, my cross-hatching is so fine and feathery, just really, really light, and I can achieve, you know, a very high degree of realism with this kind of thing. Let me do just a little bit more. So that's one extreme. And usually with this technique, I also incorporate a little bit of pointillism, actually, at the end of the lines. Something like that, okay? And then the kind of cross-hatching I'm utilizing for most of this illustration well, no, let me say, for the tree, that is, for this illustration, that was about like this. All right. Now for the for this new city illustration, they want it looser. So the difference is basically, I'm just going to make the lines a little further apart. Can you see the difference between that and that? Here they're further apart. Now I have one more gear, one more layer in me, and it's what I call scribble hatching. Well, and it's this, and I do a lot of that in my illustration work. So that's messier than that. I am not going to do this, I don't think, on this illustration. I feel like that would just be a little bit too, bridge too far, be a little bit too different. Hey, Carolyn, do you really? You make those little lines, those little dots after your lines? Good for you. Carolyn, do you work in pen and ink? Evidently you do, eh? In like in fine arts or in illustration? Are you an illustrator? I don't remember. Forgive me. Huh. Plein air and streets. Thank you, Carolyn. That was fun to see. Do you show? Never mind. Well, let's carry on our conversation offline, Carolyn. I want to ask more about you. Are you in any galleries in the area? I mean, you're more than welcome to answer. I just don't want to pry things out of you in a public forum. You know, all 14 people that are watching. Well, it's actually 24. Woohoo! We're in the big time now. I do appreciate you guys watching, truly. All right, I'm sitting back again and looking and asking myself, do I like it? And am I hitting the target? What I think my client wants? And okay, got it, Carolyn. What fun. Thank you. I look forward to running into you in person next time. Or in the, oh, I don't enter shows either. That's not part of my career at all. I've been in as many as 8 galleries at one time across North Carolina, and I am currently in 0. That's a long story. I won't go into it, but gallery sales are I don't know if it's not a good season for galleries. I'll be that bold. I'll put it that way. Oh, you're friends with Anne. Oh, Anne is such a dear. I think everybody who knows Anne knows she's a dear, don't they? I love Anne. Anne's life and mine have intersected at very surprising and sweet points here and there, so to speak. You know, like, oh, it's Anne. Going back nearly 20 years. She used to work at a big ad agency here in town, and I always enjoyed very much when I had the opportunity to work for that ad agency because she was always so sweet to work with. Yeah, by the way, I like this illustration. I mean, so far. One when I'm teaching, well, I've got a mess up right here. Let's fix this right away. Oh, what fun! Good for you. Good for you. When I teach painting, when I'm painting, and of course, if I'm broadcasting, excellent. The teacher always learns more than the pupil, right, Carolyn? When you teach, that's part of the reason I broadcast, by the way. I make no secret of that, folks. Why do I broadcast so much? First of all, it has not been tremendously lucrative. although I can't complain too much. In the last couple months, I've averaged, I shouldn't be telling you my financial business, should I? But just for what it's worth, I get about 8,000 views per day on my channel, which translates into about $150 or $200 a month of income. So not a ton, not a lot, nowhere near worth the you know, how much per hour am I making by broadcasting? Well, quick analysis shows I'm not doing it for the money. That's the point I want to make. No, I am not doing this broadcasting for the money. I'm doing it because I just have some screw loose in my head. I admit it. I readily admit it. I like to admit all my weaknesses right up front. It gives you permission to have more of them. A little bit of personal insight escapes out of my mouth. Let me repeat that. I like admitting my weaknesses right up front because it gives me permission to have more of them. I'm sorry. Forgive me while I laugh at myself. Oh, anyway, for some reason, the screw loose to which I'm referring at the moment is I love an audience. When you guys aren't here, I have a good time too. I put on either history, philosophy, science, theology, podcasts, smart stuff usually by smart people. I love listening to history and science, all kinds of stuff. But even more than that, usually I enjoy just interacting with you guys. It's weird. I mean, who'd have thought? Most artists hate having people watch them. And for some reason, like I said, the proverbial screw loose, for some reason I like it. All right, come on. Let me get back to ADD. Oh, Carolyn. Oh, my goodness. My favorites. There's one out of BBC 4 called In Our Time that has culture, religion, history, and philosophy, and science. In Our Time. That's one of my favorites. I'll have to think about it. Anyway, I'll get back to you. All right, let me. I've been trying to say for several minutes here, and I've been so rudely interrupting myself, I can't even get it out. When I'm teaching painting, and pertussis. That's great. When I'm teaching painting, I'm as you know, always saying the essence of good painting is making interesting marks. And of course, if I'm drawing, I say the same thing. The essence of good drawing is making interesting marks. Oh, good, Carolyn, I will. The Morning Brew. Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. Always open to good suggestions. You know what? I watch a surprisingly few, or listen to surprisingly few art podcasts, not because I don't like them, but because most of the time when I'm listening, I'm drawing. And when you listen to art podcasts, you have to look. And you can't draw and watch somebody else draw at the same time very well. Although I know a number of you do that with me. You've told me. You just watch me while you're painting. Good for you. which means you're not really watching me very. I'm on to your secret here. It's out now. You're just being kind when you say you watch me. You just hear me rambling in the background, which is probably where I belong. Rambling in the background. Okay. I'm going to get this out yet, I promise. The essence of good painting and good drawing is making interesting marks. And often when I give that little tirade, that lecture, that rant, you'll often hear me talk about the drawings of Rembrandt, the god over us all. I have a little bit of respect for Rembrandt, in case you can't tell. If you don't, I don't want to hear about it. Anyway, Rembrandt was kind of good. Anyway, uh-oh, somebody's calling me. Oh, good. It's somebody I could ignore today. All right. So I talk often about the otherworldly skill level of Rembrandt. And it's especially seen in his drawings and etchings. And hi, Susan. Yeah, you're one of my, you put me on while you paint. Good. I'm glad you feel like you get it all. Good enough. Good enough. That's evidently a skill I haven't perfected yet, and that's all right. So what am I aiming? I'm going to brag a little bit, only a little bit, I promise. But at the moment, this to me feels like a good drawing. I'm glad that my client gave me permission to loosen up a little bit. The reason I say it's a good drawing, and again, if you go to my Dan Nelson Art, you can find drawings there that are hyper realistic or super realistic, whatever. But that is not the best drawing. The best drawing is that which combines two things: recognizable objects. There's no question this is a city skyline, right? Those are buildings. But more than that, what your mind is perceiving is that these are marks rendered by a real human being with a degree of spontaneity, looseness, all those other words. Joie de vivre, sprezzatura, a little French word, little Italian word. Right? You perceive more than just the recognizable object. You pick up on almost, I've never said it this way before. It's almost like the viewer is picking up on the mood. The humanity is a better way to put it, I think. The humanity of the artist. You're perceiving the marks themselves, the raw marks themselves. And that creates a buzz in your mind of recognition. By that I mean, when you look at these marks, it touches the prefrontal cortex. No. It touches the lizard, your lizard brain, your precognitive brain. You have a sense of identification. Forgive me while I explicate this to a higher degree than normal. When you see these marks, your hand, if I may, it's almost as your hand kind of twitches with identification, because you go, ooh, my hand makes marks like that too. Does that make sense? I think that's one way to describe what happens with expressive painting or expressive drawing. When I look at a drawing by Rembrandt, I go, oh man, no, I don't mean to claim by that I'm as good as he is. No, by no means. I just mean I can identify. I have a hand like his, or he has a hand like mine. Maybe either one. And so all of this, of course, pertains to painting as well, very much so. The marks themselves are paramount, are more important than the what I usually call the picture. Mispronouncing the word on purpose, of course, just because I'm ornery. Mispronouncing that word on purpose too, just because I'm ornery. Sorry, you non-English speakers, the word is ornery. But if you're from the South, it's ornery. Sorry. And if you can't hear the difference between those, because either you're whatever. Ornery is correct. Honorary is redneck ornery. And I'm not really redneck, but I know a lot of them. I'm going to change my mind here. I'm going to do a little bit of scribble cross-hatching right there, but not too much, because I think it'd be too much out of character with the other illustrations that I'm doing for these people, but just a little bit. Again, the difference is normal cross-hatching, I make lines only with the downstroke. Every time my pen is moving that way, I make a stroke. This kind, I make marks in both directions. Get it? Both kinds it require a lot of muscle memory. My cross-hatching is more regular than most. But when I was a junior in college, there was an art major. I forget his name now. He was a very serious fellow. Honestly, he was like one of those people that was like 40 years old when he was 22. Do you know what I mean? He's just a very sober guy, very intelligent and very gifted artist. And my goodness, he did cross-hatching that put mine to shame. It was so regular. I mean, you wondered, did you use a ruler to do that? He didn't. He did not use a ruler. But, whew, I still remember him. I wish I knew his name. I'd love to know what he's doing. He was a very highly skilled artist. That's why I remember him 50 years later. Would love to know what he's doing. Anyway, my cross-hatching tends to be fairly tight and regular, but it's positively messy compared to some people. One of the beauties of being a human being is that nobody can make marks exactly like me, and I can't make marks exactly like we are as unique. Our marks are as unique as our fingerprints. That is really true. We can be influenced by other people. We can even try to imitate them to some degree, but we can never really, if we're in the imitation mode, we can imitate, but we can never truly do the marks that another person does. The closest I've ever come to that imitation is about 20 years ago when I was just getting into oil painting. I took one of those classes. It was a week by week. You know, I was in this class for 6 months at least, where I did a painting of a William Bouguereau. I did a copy of a William Bouguereau painting. Many of you have seen that. Many of you have done that. Forgive me, I will boast for a minute. David, if you're listening, cover your ears. I improved on the Bouguereau painting a little bit. And even though that sounds reprehensible, I'm as serious as I can be. Of course, his painting had suffered a little bit of deterioration with oxidization, so I eliminated that. Plus, the face in his woman was just a little bit peculiar. It's one of his most regular models. You recognize her. Anyway, and if you doubt that I'm telling you the truth, just go to dannelsonart.com, click on paintings, open the portrait, and you will see my 20-year-old imitation of William Bouguereau. Copying, folks. I mean, you know, now, am I saying I'm as good as Bouguereau? Are you kidding? Listen to me laugh. Okay, now I am not being arrogant. Are you kidding? No. No, no, no. Now, do I want to paint like Bouguereau? Well, you know, for that one painting I did, after I did it once, I was done. That was it. And I do, even though, you know, some people would want to take my badge away for saying so, I really do like Bouguereau's paintings. It's not Rembrandt, but it's beautiful anyway. Okay, there you go. So there's part of the mystery of art. I mean, anybody who doesn't admire Bouguereau is just drunk the Kool-Aid too far down. Sorry to be mean. I criticize, you know, the hyper-realistic, and I would put Rembrandt tending that way, of course, tending toward the, you know, away from Rembrandtish expressive marks. You know, Bouguereau wiped out all his marks, right? But anyway, the bottom line is it impressive? Oh my goodness, yes. Beautiful? Yeah. Enchanting? Oh my goodness. Like crazy. And again, some people I would get demoted for admitting that in some circles. But the people that feel that way, like I said, they've jumped too much of the art establishment Kool-Aid. Knock off the Clement Greenberg, would you? Get away from Clement for a while. So you don't know what I'm talking about. That's all right. A little bit of art history there. Uncle Clement, the grumpiest art critic in the 20th century. No question, and he deserves every bit of my whatever it is that I'm giving him. Oh my goodness, he made no bones about, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard, okay, rant number 426, cover your ears if you're tired of my rants. Okay, you've heard the old joke of, maybe you haven't, of a Puritan is someone who can't sleep at night for fear that somebody somewhere in the world might be having a good time. By the way, that's what's the word? That is not true, actually. That is historically not at all true. In many of the puritanical writings, they were actually right earthy people, right, really earthy people. But anyway, the reputation they have is what is reflected in that statement. All right, so Clement Greenberg, here's my I couldn't sleep at night. I'm being facetious here, and if you don't know who he is, Google him. Clement Greenberg couldn't sleep at night for fear that some artist somewhere was having fun, was creating something attractive, was creating, God forbid, something beautiful. He had nightmares. He would wake up in a cold sweat if he ever thought that somebody was creating something beautiful. So you don't have to read Clement Greenberg now. I have just summarized him for you in one audacious, ridiculous word picture. So take me with a grain of salt, right? All right, well salted, are we? Good. Okay. That's Clement Greenberg. A little commentary from me there on 20th century art. A necessary tantrum. We all had to go through it. We did. The human race had to go through it. But I now contend we are through it. Get over it. Move beyond. Let Clement rest in peace. Let his crusty, rusty soul rest in peace. All right. There you go. A little bit of philosophy and history all wrapped up in pen and ink. Speaking of which, I think it's really cool that I have this ink illustration job that I'm doing right in the middle of Inktober. Some of you don't know what Inktober is. I really didn't become keenly aware of it until this year. So just do a search for hashtag Inktober, or if you want to see this year's contributions, Inktober 2019. I plan to do that one of these days here real soon. It's nothing serious at all. It's just one of those funny little things that happens in the internet world every once in a while. Some crazy person started it several years ago, and now it's become a thing. So much so that here I am talking about it on October 10th. Is Uncle with us finally? Are you here finally? Where are you? Where are you? I see Michael greeting. Oh, there you are. Hello, all. Good to have you, Mike. Uncle, we've been missing you. Thank you again, my friend, for your contribution. Really, you're overdoing it. Stop. Although I did get online and priced again the next Mevo. Thank you very much. So I'm very close. And I also, by the way, for what it's worth, Uncle, you'll get a kick out of this. I actually spent some time sending quite a long description of my grievances to them. I have no idea if they'll respond back. I was very fair. I was very honest. It was not a rant. I was very polite. But I did spend several minutes. I gave them 3 things that I was unhappy about with them. And I told them I'm a huge Mevo user. Uncle, good question. He's asking about the pen and ink. How long did it take? Back to this one. Much longer than I expected. Part of the reason is I did some preliminary. I drew it, 2 layers, shipped it, emailed it to my client, and they said, "Can you add more layers?" So I did. So I actually did the whole drawing, and then came back and added considerable. And I like it. I'm glad they did that. By the way, again, it looks a lot better if all these bits are black. Like what I'll post online will be the blanks between the logs will be black. Then it makes sense. Then it looks like you're looking at a stack of logs. I would guess 5 hours of drawing, Uncle. I would guess. And a little bit, as I've mentioned earlier, a little bit of scratching and a little bit of painting with white gouache here and there. And then a noticeable amount of cleanup in Photoshop. So the versions that I'm posting, I'll post this also on YouTube channel, on YouTube community. It's a fun piece. It's very abstract, isn't it? It's again, it doesn't look so hot with all the white, but with the black in between, I think it's a very fun, abstract, pen and ink drawing. I think I'll probably put it on my website. I'm not sure. Anyway, thanks for asking. My guess is between 5 and 6 hours, not counting the sketches. Just the finished drawing, 5 or 6 hours. So there, and that is a very fair question. I always wonder the same thing of other people. I did most of it at the beach last week, so it was fun. I had a great time sitting at the glass dining room table, listening to the kids play, and so on and so forth. So I do not consider myself abused by working on vacation at all. I consider myself extremely blessed, as a matter of fact. Hello, Vince. Good to hear your comment. Are you talking about the pen and ink lot one, I presume? Yeah. So as you can see, that my client requested quite a bit looser style on this one. And so far, I'm actually liking it quite well. My guess is, just from the feedback, I'm getting to know them better and better as we exchange communication. I think they're going to like this too. I think this is probably what they're looking for. To me, this has actually a more sophisticated look to it than some of my more refined. Tell you what, just on a lark. Okay, so you guys get to see my. Can I adjust this? Hang on just a second. That'll have to do. I'm going to go over here and see if I have a stack of old illustrations here. I mean, old in the last couple years. And while we're talking about pen and ink and so on, let me pull up a couple things just to share with you. Oh yeah, there's some pen and ink and watercolor. I want to see if I have a piece of tight pen and ink illustration. Sorry, I'm laughing at my own cartoons. That's really not cool, is it? Laugh at your own cartoons. That's kind of arrogant, isn't it? Sorry. Okay, here, hang on. I'm not going to stay over here long, I promise. Oh my goodness, there's some old stuff here. Just, I want to, again, since I advertised this particular broadcast as pen and ink, I'll give you some pen and ink. In my closet here, which I'm not going to open. I know I have some really finished stuff, but this will do. So just for fun, since some of you bring it up, let's do a little survey of different approaches to pen and ink illustration. Now this is, forgive me, I'll get it all. Okay, so this is one of my architectural renderings, pen and ink, and you can see fairly sophisticated, that is detailed, pretty fine. That was done with a rapidograph pen and brown ink, and then of course watercolor on top. So that's, oh, I've got a whole folder full of them here. I didn't realize there's a whole bunch. That's not necessarily my favorite one. Let's see if there's one in here that I like better. Never mind, they're stuck. I won't worry about it. Okay. This is a cartoon. This is it was for art lecture I was giving, and I was actually mocking evolutionary psychology. Google it, evolutionary psychology. We're attracted to round things and red things. Therefore, anyway, never mind. I'll trigger more of you with that. Here's the cartoon. I have no idea. Now, this is not cross-hatching, except that it's got pencil shading. But that's some of my cartoon. I have no idea who I did this for. I have no idea why I did it. But that's a fair reflection of my cartooning style. Oh, this is a mistake. I didn't mean to grab these. Oh, is that all? Oh, yeah, that's all. These are nice illustrations, but they're not pen and ink at all. All right. I thought I picked up something else, but evidently I didn't. All right, so my part of what I was going to say is that I think this is actually a more sophisticated look. This is a more New Yorker look. And we all know if it looks like New York, doggone, it must be good. All right, some big comments. Uncle 60. Oh, cool. I like it. I read that. How about that? The app. Good idea. Right. I do fear that this broadcast is just, well, it's been just one long ramble, hasn't it? You guys need to get a life. But thanks for joining me, really. I appreciate it. I really do. I'm going to add just a few buildings that were not in my sketch, because I actually want the illustration to be slightly longer than it was originally, than my sketch was, I mean. Okay, with this, like, for instance, drawing windows here, I'm obviously playing with the notion of forcing the viewer to turn those into regular windows, even though several of them are just dots, right? the same exact thing, I want to say, the same exact thing that you do in good painting. Ooh, I like that building. I like that building too. Hold on, let me move you guys a little bit. Sorry about that. By the way, I made up this city completely last week when I was doing the rough sketch. Which means, by definition, doesn't it, means that all the buildings in the sketch then either came out of my mind, out of my file cabinet, which in my terminology is a bad thing, or it came out of my reference file, which is what, as an artist, you want to replace your file cabinet with a reference file. Hey, but I bet a bunch of you have no idea what I'm talking about. That might be something worth rambling about. Okay, so let me invite you here for a few minutes. Let's see if I can stay on topic for a while. Let me invite you into my drawing class that I have given many times. It's probably the one class I agree, Michael. Yeah, drawing, not known for its speed, right? At least with the painting, you can pick up a 4-inch wide brush, isn't that right? Drawing sort of presupposes you're using a sort of a skinny linear tool, so it takes longer just by virtue of the fact that the tool makes such small marks. Yeah. All right, drawing class. The class, by the way, I'm teaching it again at Art of the Carolinas. If any of you can come, I still have lots of room in my drawing class. They were evidently, whoever's in charge, that would be Sharon, was expecting a high demand for my drawing class because she put me in one of the rooms with 30 seats in it. So last time I checked, I still have 20 some seats available. I am going to pull out all the stops here. People often, and I can understand, complain about the cost of classes at Art of the Carolinas. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about. That's all right. Just Google, if you want to, Google Art of the Carolinas. It's really a fun event, and people do come from all over the country to little old Raleigh, North Carolina, to attend Art of the Carolinas. It's like an art trade show. It is really fun. Even if you don't take any classes, it's fun just walking through seeing the demos being done. You're a little bit far away, are you, Vince? Well, believe it or not, Vince, there are people that come here from France. There really are. But okay. Full disclosure, it's vendors who are selling paint who come from Marseille every year. My friends Bruno and Laurence, my old friend, literally truly my old friends from Marseille, are there every year. Anyway, I was promising to stay on task, and I'm doing a very bad job. Let me do some teaching. Okay. All human beings, when we come into the world, we're our brain is to some extent, the proverbial blank slate, right? And we begin absorbing visual information more than anything else at a truly breathtaking, bordering on miraculous rate. What the brain of an infant and toddler is learning every minute is just truly staggering. Google it. And in order to survive in life, our eyes, really our mind, our brain, but our eyes pull off this amazing trick. And it is that in order to survive on an overload of visual stimulus, our brain starts filing away. That's where my term filing cabinet comes from. Our brain starts filing away simple shorthand images for everything in our world. That's how we survive. It is by taking things especially things that we encounter repeatedly in our experience, and our mind simplifies it and condenses it into what I call an SOS. SOS stands for survival-oriented symbol, or an SSSOS, which stands for a super simple survival-oriented symbol. Okay, did you catch that? That's what our brain does with all the megatons of visual information that hits our retina. Starting in infancy, our brain starts coagulating, starts condensing all the visual stuff in our life, especially the things that we see repeatedly. It condenses everything down into an SOS or an SSS, super simple survival-oriented symbol. The reason is so that our brain doesn't have to work so hard. Okay, basically. So that sounds like a convenient evolutionary process. We want to get through life burning as few calories as possible because we don't know when and where our next calories are going to come from. Okay, that would be the if you will, the evolutionary take on what I'm saying here. It's okay, I'm comfortable with that. So as we go through life, our mind, even our brain, is continually amassing this huge collection of SSSOSs that allows us to run through the forest without tripping. It allows us to drive down the freeway at 80 miles an hour. Not only are we not terrified, which logically we ought to be, most of us driving down the freeway at 80 miles an hour are more in danger of falling asleep. Think about it. Where our greater danger is boredom. Here we are with 3 tons of steel underneath our right foot, hurtling down the freeway at literally breakneck speed, and we're in danger of falling asleep. Why is that? It's because your brain has amassed this huge collection, I call it our filing cabinet, of visual stimuli, so that you don't need to gaze at most of the things in your world. Again, like when you're driving, you do not need to study carefully everything flashing by, flashing through your retina. You don't need to study it at all. One cursory glance and your brain goes, your mind goes, yep, done, got it, move on. Okay? That's how our brain has successfully kept all of us alive. Not by working hard, but by, in fact, avoiding hard work. Okay? Burning as few calories as possible interpreting the visual data that hits our retina. Are you with me? Now, all of that is great for staying alive, but it's absolutely terrible for becoming an artist. Because once you make up your mind to start drawing things that you see in your world, you're asking your eyes to do something that is virtually foreign to their function. That's why people can't draw. Okay? Hang on, I'm interrupting this teaching. All right, so that's what I call your filing cabinet. Your filing cabinet is got tens of thousands, maybe millions perhaps, of SSSOSs, super simple survival-oriented symbols. But when it comes time to draw something, all of a sudden you need to look at things carefully, which your eyes, your brain is not in the habit of doing. Because your brain is in the habit of not looking at things carefully so that you can use your brain doing other things. Am I making sense? This is, again, I teach this in all of my drawing classes. And I was going to say, if you can get down to Raleigh at Art of the Carolinas, I'm going to pull out all the stops and do my absolute best job of teaching drawing that I possibly can, because the classes are expensive and I want to give people their money's worth. All right, so if you, I'll just jump ahead and say, if you want to become an artist, then you need to replace your filing cabinet, which is bad for drawing. Here, let me take a detour just for a minute, okay? I'll use this Post-it note that's right handy. And turn off the light table. All right, let's talk about how does a 3-year-old draw mommy? First of all, not a stick figure. This is how a 3-year-old, most 3-year-olds draw mommy. Recognize that? That's an SSSOS. How does a 5-6-year-old draw a house? You recognize these things because they are ubiquitous. This is what comes out of, there's a chimney, there's smoke. What's a tree look like? Basically a lollipop. Where's the sun? Up here in the corner. Got it? All of these are SOSs, super or survival-oriented symbols, or SSSOSs. And this is what you have to fight against to be a real artist. All right, let me continue drawing on. In order to be a real artist, you embark on a lifelong project of replacing all the images in your file cabinet by turning your filing cabinet into a reference file. By the way, my glove has gotten dirty, so I throw that one across the room. That'll go in the laundry, and I'm all out of brushes. So some of you have not seen this operation, so here we go. I buy these gloves, 30 of them for $2 or something like that, really cheap. So I don't have any trouble. Some of you wondered, where do you get those gloves? Now you're getting the answer to that question. Okay, those go in the trash. And there, we now have a clean glove. And I do throw them in the laundry. And either me or my wife or my daughter, whoever's washing clothes, they just find them on the washing machine and throw them in there with their load. And eventually, most of them get back to my office. I've got a dirty smudge right here, by the way, that I want to fix. But before I do, let me put down some Post-it notes to protect. I got some real dirty stuff right there. All right. If you want to be an artist, you have to replace your SOS file with a reference file. Now, what is a reference file? It's your artistic memory. Let's take something silly. Let's say you want to draw or paint a picture of a squirrel. Let's just imagine you've never really drawn a squirrel before. Now you could take a wild stab at a squirrel. You could do something. Let me pick a tool that's not quite so, and a piece of paper that's not quite so small. Okay, you can say, I'm going to draw a squirrel, and I think a squirrel looks something like this. You get the idea? Something like that. There's a nut, and then there's a big tail. Okay. Okay. Does that look like a squirrel? Kinda. This is sort of a cross. Did this come from my SOS file? Is it my super simple survival-oriented symbol of a squirrel? Yeah, partly. Or is it a reference? That is, have I actually studied squirrels and drawn them? Well, I have drawn squirrels in the past. That's why mine's probably better than most people's would be. But it's not a very good reference because it's been a long time since. So how do you build your reference file? The answer is you look at stuff, either photographs of stuff or real stuff, and you copy it carefully. That's how you, so eventually your SOS file, here, let me draw a diagram for this. I love diagrams, don't I? So as an artist, here's your filing cabinet. SOS, survival-oriented symbol. It's got millions of images in it. As an artist, you replace this with, what am I going to draw now? I don't know. I'll draw a pair of glasses to represent seeing stuff. You replace this file with things that you've actually looked at carefully, like the proverbial squirrel. Okay? And then you study the squirrel very, 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 very carefully, and then from that experience you build there you go. There we go. That's a much bigger and better filing cabinet that's filled with actual memories of what actual things actually look like. And the only way to build this is by studying real stuff. All right, there. So this cityscape was drawn entirely out of my head. Now the question is, was it reference file or was it SOS? It's pretty obvious. I must have sometime in my life spent some time looking at real buildings, right? But here's the big but. Here's the warning. If I were to spend, say, too much time, or only times, I guess, if I only spent time drawing cityscapes out of my head, what would happen? What would happen is that this reference file would begin to decay and it would turn back into an SOS file. So that's why you're continually, as artists, our entire life, we're always working on either building or rebuilding our reference file, because we do not trust. One of the things that I'm preaching against here, okay, now it's turned into a real rant. One of the things I'm ranting against here is the immature notion that drawing or painting stuff out of your head is of particular value or of particular skill. It is not. When you draw stuff out of your head by definition shrinks. That's poetic, funny language, not literal, of course. In case you were wondering, does he mean that literally? You'll be glad to know I do not. Your head does not literally shrink. Anyway, figuratively speaking, it's just a fun way to describe the process. And I think probably everybody listening to me knows that. But you all know some young adolescent artists who in fact do think that drawing things out of your head is a particularly good skill. It is not. It is one of the earmarks of early journey artists, or even what I just called adolescent artists. Okay. There is another. My mind is still worrying, not worrying, worrying. My mind is still worrying about the term adolescent art. I have a completely other thing in the art world that I call adolescent art. I was at a big art competition several years ago. I won't get into it any more than that. It was a very wide open art competition. There were a lot of amateurs in the competition. There were a lot of phenomenal, really good artists at the same time. So it wasn't amateur, but there were amateurs invited, and a lot of them participated. And they all, and many of them. That's where I coined the term in my own mind at that time. I coined the term adolescent art to describe much of what was in this show, if we can call it that. You'll recognize it, I think, when I begin describing it. Here's adolescent art includes a lot of skulls and dragons and maybe castles, which I need to be careful here because I really like drawing castles. So every once in a while, I imbibe, I partake of a little adolescent artistry myself. Have been known to draw the occasional dragon. I usually draw the line at skulls. There's too many other adolescent artists already doing skulls, so I don't usually do that. But anyway, just for what it's worth. And there's a surprising degree of, what's the word? Literal, you know what I'm talking about. You can see a lot of adolescent art on a lot of adolescent art websites like, oh man, you know, Tumblr, Pinterest, what's the other one I'm drawing a blank now? Big art website that's almost all young people. Lots of skulls, lots and lots and lots of skulls. And some of you will recognize, you will say, yeah, that's a good term, adolescent art. Adolescents, for some reason, are really given over to death images, skulls, and so forth. Anyway, that is neither here nor there. You don't have to pay any attention to what I just said. I'm just rambling because it's my broadcast and I can ramble if I want to. Some of you are crazy. Susan, rant alert ahead. No question. No question. Oh, and I'm sorry, we're going to get some noise here, I'm afraid. But my broadcast is about to end prematurely if I don't plug in my phone. Ooh, just in time. Maybe not in time. All right. Hey, Marlene, what a great comment. The Zen of Seeing. Hang on. All right, this is prompted. Okay, since evidently today I'm in the habit of turning you guys around wherever I'm going. I'm going over to my computer, my good old Mac, and I do mean old, but it's still working, so why fix it if it ain't broke? I want to look that up. The Zen of Seeing. I think I've heard of that book before. Is it a book? I'm assuming it's a book. I've seen it, Marlene. I've heard of it before, but I've never looked it up. So let's do that. The Zen of Seeing. Oh, it looks like it might be available as a PDF, which means I can download it onto my phone. I won't do it on my computer, but I will do it on my phone. What's the subtitle? Seeing Drawing as Books and Spirituality. Woo. Seeing drawing as a spiritual discipline. Oh, that's interesting. The Zen method. admirably suited to the active temperament in a way of contemplation. Huh. A renowned Dutch artist, Frederick Frank. How about that? Good. It's interesting. I'll look for that, Marlene. Yeah, it's obviously related to stuff I'm talking about here. Thanks for that. All right, back to work. I'm on the verge of finishing an entire illustration between rants. That's remarkable, isn't it? Should I put some people on this path? They didn't ask for people. I'm going to put people way over here. I haven't mentioned this yet today. Yes, Francois. The name of the pen is Pen. Forgive me, it's a terrible name. Marketing. Pen and Ink Sketch is the name of the pen. All right, let me go back to a trick that I employ often when I'm. This is a fairly recent development in the last year or two. When I'm drawing foliage in this loose, sketchy manner, as you can see, I started here and I did a random line going from left to right. Are you with me? And then I turn around and go back exactly the opposite direction, doing a second random line on top of the first. So I end up with this more truly random shape than if I just try to draw it all at once. And then typically I'll come back and do a few dots, leaves that are escaping the mass of the foliage, and then a few circles inside, which hint at like what is traditionally called sky holes, what I call tree holes. Okay, so that's just a little trick, and again, that's just for a loose. I utilize this technique. I have used when I'm doing my architectural renderings. Just a way to quickly convey or quickly indicate the randomness, if you will, of foliage, leaves. Drawing randomly is one of the hardest things in the world for human beings to do. We are so given to structure and order. It's very hard for us to draw at random. So my trick about going one direction and come back and going the other is a way to overcome that difficulty. All right, so there's just a, whoops, forgive me, there's just a one approach to drawing foliage. Continue. Yep, sorry about that, gang. Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, people from all over the world, that is true, Michael. Fun, huh? Michael was thinking of doing a dragon painting. Go for it. Yeah. So yeah, take my rant about adolescent art, with good-naturedly as it is meant. I am not particularly given to drawing skulls, although I've been known to draw a badass skull or two in my day. I hope my mom's not listening. She might approve of my use of the word ass. Donkey. But I have been known to draw a castle or 10 and a dragon or so. So, perfectly fine. So back to the just for a minute, since I went on that rant to the degree that I did, this notion of filing cabinet, which I'm using as a term, that's where we file away innately, naturally. All human beings do it. We file away images that help us zip through life without killing ourselves. As an artist, we're trying to train our brain to do what it is not accustomed to doing, which is stop, stare, keep it there, zoning in, focusing, really, really, really seeing things, which it sounds like the Zen of seeing might be a reference to that. That it is Zen-like is a good description, I think, of the meditative state into which you must enter in order to really look at something. And again, it's an unnatural act. I don't blame anybody in the world for not being a good artist. I don't look down. People say all the time, "Oh, I can't draw a straight line." Blah 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 blah. And there's no embarrassment in my book about people not being able to draw well, because those of us who do draw well, we should acknowledge, we're the misfits, we're the oddballs. Why can't everybody do this? Because you don't need to do this to survive. I just went off camera again. Oh, Uncle, that's a good question. Is not a commissioned illustration out of your head? Good question. Wow. No, the answer is there's no simple answer to that question. No, it can go either way. It can go either way. Back in the day when I was doing a lot of comps and storyboards, I'm hoping that term is making sense. That's where a commercial, the ad agency is making a commercial, TV commercial, so usually, so they want to show their client what the TV commercial is going to have in it. So they ask an illustrator to do sort of like a comic book, a series of illustrations, quick illustrations to show their client, to see if their client likes the idea. So that's called a comp or a storyboard. And back, as I say, in the day, especially like say all through the 90s, I did quite a bit of that. Enjoyed it very much. I still do it occasionally. But back in those days, I would typically rely very heavily on photo reference. I would take Polaroid pictures of things, my hands for instance, and then copy or even trace the if you can imagine such a thing. So it was a commission job, but I did not draw out of my head. I drew very often, very heavily relying on photography. One of the ironies is, now that I'm the age of whatever age I am now, I still get a call. A couple weeks ago, I was asked to do. In fact, I was going to show you. Did it not come up? I was asked to do some storyboards. Oh yeah. And here's one of the frames that I did for my client. And this is all out of my head. So ironically, it's a little girl holding a shield, et cetera, et cetera. That's what they wanted a picture of. And I love doing storyboards because I do it all out of my head. Now that's different from what I did when I was in my 40s. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't mean I wouldn't use photo reference now if I needed to. I think part of it is I just enjoy pulling on my my reference file of especially human anatomies. I have more fun drawing people out of my head. Even, listen, anytime you draw anything out of your head, your battery is wearing down. The way you charge your battery back up is by looking and copying. Okay, does that make sense? So like it's like there's a decay, there's a shelf life for your reference file. It doesn't last forever. Like I know at some point in my past I've drawn a squirrel carefully, but now, I mean, I just did a real quick scribble, of course, but I've forgotten a lot of squirrel details because it's been a long time since I studied a squirrel, just as an example. Does that make sense? Anyway, so no, Uncle, they're often. Last year I did a book, I mentioned earlier today, a pen and ink illustration of, it had 48 illustrations plus the cover, and I made a very conscious decision early in the process not to use photo reference for these 48 illustrations, but in fact to do them all out of my head. There was a reason for that. It was that I felt like for the book that I was illustrating, I felt like having an illustrative style was most appropriate to the book. And so when you use reference like photographs, you tend to draw in a tighter, more realistic manner. And I felt like for this particular book, so I did all these crazy illustrations of this girl doing all kinds of crazy things, all out of my head. And again, it was great fun. But that, having said that, every time you draw out of your, so to speak, every time you draw out of your head, that means it's time to go back and do some more study to build up your reference file again, because you took a lot of the stuff out of your head. It needs to be sharpened and replaced. Otherwise, you find yourself drawing actually the same things over and over and over again. That's what you see when you're walking at a state fair or downtown Manhattan, and you see people doing caricatures of people, you know, for $5 or $25, whatever it is. Almost always, when you look at the artwork, you see that the person is not refilling their reference file. They're drawing out of their head. So they use the same lips, the same eyes, same eyebrows, same ears, same clothing over and over and over and over again, because they're drawing too fast to study their subject matter. So they're just, you know, they have a filing cabinet of, 20 different styles of noses, and they say, oh yeah, this person has nose number 14, has lips number 7, has eyebrows number 24. And that's how those people that do those real fast caricatures, that's how most of them do it. If any of you are some of those people, feel free to complain at me. Say, oh, I do not do that. Hello, Warren. Here at Jerry's. That's hilarious. Hello, Michael. Unfortunately, I do not have a book in print. That is a shame. I've been working on a couple of them for years. I'm just too busy. I would like to do it eventually. One book is Explaining Modern Art, so it's historical and philosophical, dealing with 20th century art movements. It is neither a love fest nor a rant. It's a measured and balanced, I think, hope analysis of what most people call modern art. Yes, I'm not talking here like an academic or an intellectual. I'm just using the term as most people use it. The other book is the Breakable Laws of Painting. Some of you regulars who've heard me talk about that. It's on mothballs, that's all I can say. Hey, Nirav Shanda. Thank you for that very nice compliment. That is very encouraging. Thank you. Some of you, Warren brought up the subject of Jerry's Artorama So Warren, this past week I was in out of town. I was in Wilmington, North Carolina, where there is not a Jerry's Artorama, and I discovered that I am very spoiled. I mean, there are a lot of good art stores around the country, of course, but in Raleigh, that's the one we have. And I was missing it very badly. Not to name names, but I went to Hobby Lobby, I went to AC Moore, and I went to Michael's, and none of them had what I needed. That was distressing. So I'm definitely recognize that I'm spoiled rotten. Bear with me just a minute here. I am having to change in-ear monitors. It really helps me to hear what I'm saying. Not what I'm saying. Hang on just a second. Let me see if I get another monitor. Nope. Okay. All right. So I have monitored for a little while. I'm just going to making some mess over here at the moment, actually. Is it just me, or does this illustration look suspiciously like a little bit of Central Park? Is it just me, or does this look like Central Park? A view of New York from Central Park. It does, doesn't it? Not intentional. Ron Shevlin. Oh my goodness. Just when you thought it was safe to go back online. Oh my goodness. Okay, y'all. So Ron, I don't know if you're still on. I'm assuming you are. I entertain myself, as you can see. I have a small cadre of very enthusiastic followers. All these people need jobs. Because some of them are on nearly every time I broadcast. So I'm saying all that to say to you, Ron, next, that to say to everybody else, friends, this is my friend Ron Shevlin, one of my oldest and bestest friends. We go back over 40 years. I mean, good grief, what is it? How long is it? 1972. Almost, almost 50 years. What am I saying? Over 40. Nearly 50 years. Anyway, Ron, bless you. What fun. Good to have you on board. I'll try to watch myself. Try to be careful what I say. Yes, discussions about going to Jerry's. Yes, I am always like a kid in a candy store. The people at Jerry's are very nice to me. This is a joke. No, it's not a joke that they're nice to me. That it is a joke. And I used to think it was because they liked me. This is a joke. Then I realized it was because they're in business. And I'm at their store at least once a week, spending an average of $100 per visit. So do the math. I'm actually picking on my friends at Jerry's Artorama. Honestly, they are nice people. Now, they do like me, but I spend a lot of money there. If I were in a city where Utrecht or Dick Blick was the art distributor of choice, I would be there too, but I'm not. I do have a lot of friends at Jerry's. That is not the joke. I do have a lot of friends. Anyway, what fun, Ron. So how did you know I do this? Did you just stumble on me by accident? My friend Ron, he's an excellent artist. Paints things with words. Especially those sheep on the distant hillside. Can you remember that, Ron? That's a long story. All right. Enough with the inside jokes while there's other people online. Hey, you know what I've just realized? I don't need to draw all this over here, do I? I'm getting a little concerned. This illustration started out nice and loose, the way I think my client wanted. But with the addition of all this foliage, the trees and so forth in the foreground, I'm a little concerned that it's getting a little bit tight. You know, this down here. So, you see anything in here that needs interpreting, Ron? I'm thinking something like that might do the job. Just a little bit of shading over here. Yeah, let's just stay much looser. I think they might like that. I can't believe I've been going this long, y'all. You all need jobs. Ron, you need a job. Not really. The last major element in this illustration is the sky. And I'm going to use the same trick on the clouds that I used on the trees, the foliage, and that is go one direction, then turn around and go the other direction. Now, the one difference that I'm going to do with the clouds that is different from the trees is I'm either going to take a scratch tool and or gouache, white paint, either one or the other, and cut into those lines quite a bit so that they feel lighter and fluffier than they do right now. Does that make sense? I'm going to do just a little bit of horizontal shading. You guys, so Ron, again, welcome to our little community. My friends here from all over the world, I don't have a lot of viewers, but they sure are spread out. This morning we've had Korea, Russia, Australia, Netherlands, a bunch in America, and I'm probably missing some. And many of them know each other because they meet on my channel on a regular basis, and as you can see, they have chat conversations. I just every once in a while I glance over and see if there's anything been addressed to me. No, they're. My voice goes Darth Vader every once in a while. Really, that's funny. Sorry about that. So if you wonder why all these people are talking to each other, it's because they're talking to each other. The whole internet has created quite an interesting world, hasn't it? I don't need the backlight for this, do I? Susan, you're not serious, I hope. I started a group in Facebook called Fans of Dan Nelson. I will go look. I'm assuming you're joking. There was something kind of funny, slightly related, did happen several years ago. Back when Facebook was newer and people were, intrigued by it. Some crazy person named Dan Nelson, not me, some crazy person named Dan Nelson did start a Facebook page for people named Dan Nelson, which was quite entertaining. It really was for quite a while. I think Facebook shut it down for some reason. I don't know why, but it was quite hilarious, and a number of us had quite a bit of fun over that for some time. I don't think it's still there, but it was a Facebook page of people named there. Some of you should try that. Some of you with rare names, like Ron Shevlin. How many other Ron Shevlins are there in a country? 2, maybe? 1? None? Ratio? You should try that. For what it's worth, since I am rambling aimlessly at the moment, I'll continue. It's my broadcast. I'll amble if I want to. I ramble, I mean. You would ramble too if it happened to you. The person that owns dannelson.com, which of course is a URL I would love to have, along with all the other Dan Nelsons who are in business, belonged to a Dan Nelson in North Dakota who was in jail. Which seems to me, when somebody goes to jail, they ought to relinquish their URLs, don't you think? So I am not the Dan Nelson who was jailed in North Dakota. He was a used car dealer. Need I say more? Come rush on down today to Dan Nelson Autos.com. I mean, anyway, officer, I was only kidding. Just the other day I did run into a Dan. I Googled myself. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, I ran into a Dan Nelson who had written a very nice country music song and sang it, and I sent him a nice compliment. Said, "Way to go, Dan Nelson. You did a good job." He said something nice back. I forget what it was. Oh, no kidding. How about that? Ron has 3 Nelson friends, Grand Dan Nelson friends. That's not surprising, really. When we lived in Minnesota, where there are a lot of Swedes, turns out, of course, the name Nelson is very popular in Swedenville, and the name Daniel is very popular as well. So there were several Dan Nelsons in Minnesota when we lived there, and at least one other Dan and Nancy Nelson, at least one of those. All right. I think this ranting and raving has gone on just about long enough. 2.5 hours too long, the truth be known. But it has been fun. So I'll probably do a little bit of scratching on this, a little bit of cross hatching in here. I like this big empty area right at the moment. It's actually kind of a nice composition has happened here. The open area, converging on a large, dark vertical shape. Just kind of a nice filling of the space. Kind of an accident. I would like to say I did that on purpose, but that would be an exaggeration. Anyway, thank you all. It's been great fun, especially Ron. It's been great fun. Lynn, I didn't see her. Let me see what you're saying. I watch every meeting, read all the chats. And get nervous. Thank you. One of my many friends who said send me private messages when I haven't broadcast in a couple days. You okay, Dan? Usually I am. Usually I am okay. So this has been a delightful couple of hours here. Some of you just joined me. You have no idea who this is talking. All you see is my hands. Recognize my hand? It's me. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Inktober 2019. Kind of fun that I'm actually doing ink work in October. Don't know when they'll be back next. Oh, I'm painting tomorrow, a live event. So hopefully I will be broadcasting downtown, doing a live event, grand opening of a fancy grocery store in downtown Raleigh. I'm excited about that. I'm getting paid. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that. And thanks, Mark. Good to have you always. Happy working through the night. Bless you. Glad you're here. Glad to help you get through the night. And I'll bid you a fond adieu probably till tomorrow. Bless you all. Bye.